Gemara. Yeah. Just finished Psachim, Baruch Hashem, today. Big day.
Wow.
Yeah, been working on it for a while. I'm going to sing and dance.
Bagels?
Perhaps some bagels would be in order.
All right.
For me.
How many daf is it? How many daf is it?
121.
Wow.
It's a big one. Yeah. We're live. Okay, so let's just do an overview and then we're going to dig into a new section here. We're saying in a general problem of this whole sicha is there seem to be two contradicting divrei chazal, right? One is mitzvahs betelos lasid lavo. One is that mitzvahs will be batal in the future. One is that the halachas of the Torah eino betel niolam. One is that the laws of the Torah, the oral law, will never be batal. And those two things are in contradiction, right? They can't be both true. In other words, if there's no mitzvah, certainly there's no oral law to go along with it. So how do we deal with it? So we resolved it. We basically said that the meaning of mitzvahs or batal means that the idea of commanding the other is going to go away because there's going to be such a unity of God that that notion will be passé. There's not going to be anyone to command, but the mitzvahs will still be there in the sense that we will all just naturally and divinely be in alignment with Hashem's essential will, which is the mitzvah. Right? So we answered it. But in the meantime, the Rabbi wants to look into these two phrases in a deeper way and focus on the fact that one of them says mitzvahs are batul in the future, whereas the other one says the halachas of Torah are not batul in the future. And he points out that there's a difference. The one that is batul is called mitzvahs. The one that says is not batul is called Torah. So then he goes to explain, this is what we said yesterday, that essentially what's the difference between mitzvahs and Torah in general is that mitzvahs assumes that there's a world and a man, right? Because you're commanding somebody to do something. So the whole concept of mitzvah, like in Hashem, is already with the presumption that there is this existence of the world and creation, etc. Right? Whereas Torah, right, is really this chamuda ganuza, it's this precious like entity within Hashem himself, which beferush existed before the world was created, right? And therefore it's when ana nafshi ksavis yahavis, like we said in the word anochi, when Hashem gives the Torah, he says basically, this is my soul. It's nothing to do with the world. The world does not exist and may never exist as far as Hashem's essential existence is concerned, right? So then what do we say? That nonetheless, what's the relationship with the Torah and the world? Because the Torah also speaks about the world. Not that the world is there and therefore the Torah has to deal with this world. No, as far as the Torah is concerned, it exists in a dimension beyond the creation. All right, there's a lot of extraneous happenings here, so we'll just wait till you guys get organized.
Sorry.
So, when it comes to Torah, there really is no world because the Torah is in this dimension which is in Hashem's essence, which precedes the concept of creation. So I think Mendel asked yesterday, what do we do with the fact that the Torah itself starts with the word Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz? Like the Torah obviously seemingly is dealing with the world. So he explained in a completely different way. No, the world is basically there bishvil haTorah. In other words, the only reason that the world exists is because Hashem wants to express His infinite level, which is beyond creation, but He wants to share that as well. In other words, so He created a world in order to allow something beyond the world to actually have an experience of being shared. Right? So it doesn't actually connote that there has to be a world. As far as Hashem is concerned, there is no world. And the level of Torah is that there will be no world. It's just that that level, that it's beyond the world, should also be experienced. And therefore He created the world, right, for the sake of expressing this level of infinity, that it should also basically have a place to show itself, right? Does everyone more or less follow?
Mm-hmm.
That was yesterday's class. Okay?
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
We learned that Hashem has mitzvahs that He does regardless of us anyway. So wouldn't that be above the world too?
Not necessarily, because that's already like the idea of him connecting himself with the world, right? Whether it's the world of Atzilus or it's the world of... But in other words, there's already a concept of there being a notion of connecting the Or Ein Sof with something else. Right? So the realm of mitzvahs within inside of Hashem, seemingly, is already when there's a problem that He created the Kav and He created this notion of worlds. Now He wants to have His plan of Adir B'Tachtonim, that those worlds should be joined with the Or Ein Sof. But the mitzvahs seemingly come in like as a afterthought to connect. They're already presuming that there's a world. This is where the realm of mitzvahs takes place.
There's always a connection with the mitzvahs.
What's that?
So with mitzvahs, no matter who or what does it, it's always a connection between two things.
Yeah, unless you're dealing, of course, with like this essential level of mitzvahs, which undoes. In other words, when we say mitzvahs betelos, now we can understand what it means. Like, in other words, the essence of the mitzvah is not necessarily batel, because the essence of the mitzvah actually, as we're going to see, is more like the union of Torah, which is not batel, which does not need a world and a sense of other. But the concept of commanding to another, where mitzvahs, the connotation of them is that there's this other thing that needs to be joined, that will be batel when it's already joined and there's no more separateness. Okay, so let's take it from inside page 455. The very last line, the very last paragraph on the first column. Does anyone have any more sheets? Any extra ones? Thank you. Here you go, sir. Al pi zeh muvan. Now, based on what we just said, the difference between Torah and mitzvahs, we can understand that mitzvahs batelus lasi lavo. Yes, mitzvahs will be batel. But hilchos shel Torah einu batel niolam, where the laws of the Torah will not be batel. Ki la'asid lavu yis'alei adam ba'olam l'darga shelamayla me'olam. Because in the future, the man and the world will elevate themselves to be in a position where they're beyond the world. Right? The whole existence of creation will be flowing into it, a level which is beyond creation. Therefore, as we just mentioned, mitzvahs, in their connotation that they're basically trying to join something other, that will go away. There's no concept of joining anymore. The halachas of the Torah, whereas the halachas, which in there, remember we said yesterday, there's halachas that have nothing to do with the world. Right, we said like the halachas of the Ir Nidachas, or the halachas of the Ben Soda or Mora. There's all these halachas that never were, never will be. And we said from them we can learn there's an aspect of every single halacha that its true place is completely beyond creation. And therefore, the halachas, which are not really having nothing to do with the world in their true source, it's just God alone, ana nafshi, I, my soul, they won't be batel. Because even when the world goes away, so then there's God, right? And God still has these halachas. Yes?
What's the word mas?
To be yachas is to have an association with. Fine. And if you want to look at footnote 51, he basically brings this whole idea out of the words of the Rambam himself, which the Rabbi often, almost as a law, will show you this Hasidic concept that it's actually sitting right in the Rambam. This whole idea that the Rebbe's sort of unleashed, that the notion of the eternality is specifically inside of the Torah, but mitzvahs will be batel. Where do we see the Rambam says that openly? Look at footnote 51. Al pi zeh yumtak diuk lashon Rambam. We can sweeten the exacting words of the Rambam, where he says davar barum. In other words, this is a piece of the Rambam where he explains that the mitzvahs will never be batel. Right? The Torah is forever. But what does he say? He says davar barum b'forish b'Torah. She mitzvah omeres the olam olamim. He specifically says it's something clear in the Torah that the mitzvahs last forever. In other words, the eternality of the mitzvahs is not, so to speak, the mitzvahs themselves, but that the mitzvahs have a root inside of the Torah, which is something eternal and never goes away. So he mentions the eternality of the mitzvahs by mentioning that they're written in the Torah. That's why they're eternal. But the mitzvahs as they are, so to speak, towards the world, not necessarily.
Aurora means clear?
Clear. Clear as the bell.
Is there a mitzvah to learn Torah?
There's a mitzvah to learn Torah.
So then the Torah itself is a mitzvah. So then how do you say that the Torah is not?
Because the Torah is a mitzvah, and what about when the world refines itself to the state of a singular unity? Just that mitzvah of learning Torah, just like every other mitzvah, will not be something that has to be commanded to you. It will be the essential will of Hashem, which is now the mitzvah as it is in Torah, the mitzvah as it is beyond the world. We're saying also that mitzvahs are not batel. It just depends what you mean by the word mitzvah, right? So the mitzvah in its state of like the Ratzon HaElyon, that it's one with God, that will last forever. That's what it actually means. Halach, that's what the halachas of the Torah are. We're calling that halachas because in general the word mitzvah means to associate the other. When we change the meaning of the word mitzvahs, that's what he says. It says in the Torah that mitzvahs will not be batul. That's the mitzvahs as they are in this new state of Torah where they're not dealing with the world anymore. So too, the mitzvah of learning Torah will be, not that you're commanded to learn Torah, but the world will automatically be learning Torah at every second, just like they'll automatically not be wearing shatnez. Right? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's true.
Think it over. All right, so going back inside, second column, second paragraph. Yesh lomar. We can say, Shaperush de lemachel lekabel scharam, right? It says, Hayom nasosam lemachel lekabel scharam. Today is for doing, and tomorrow is for receiving reward. And generally, today represents sort of before Mashiach, and tomorrow, Techias HaMesim, is the receiving of the reward. Hushi galaba Adam Yisrael, Shemakayim mitzvahs. What does it mean to receive the reward that will be revealed in the person, the Jews, who's fulfilling the mitzvah? And through the Jew, the world will also receive this reward. In Yanim Amisi Shel mitzvahs, we will finally experience the true inyan of the mitzvah, as it says, Schar mitzvah hi mitzvah atzmam, that the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. And as we'll actually experience, right now you're busy doing a mitzvah as though it's in this state of separateness and command. And you're like, I want the reward. What's the reward? So it says in Pirkei Avos, the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. And notice the reward of the mitzvah that you do as a state of separateness is the mitzvah itself in its state of singularity. Right? That's its reward, that you're going to experience the true nature of the mitzvahs as they are with Hashem's oneness. Kafishem b'Torah, as the mitzvah is in the Torah, which is above the world. The kol mitziyusu shel ha'olam hu shebo mitzkayim ratzun zeh b'poel. And so therefore, at that level, when we receive the reward, the whole existence of the world will be nothing other that this will is in a state of, activation. Right? So in other words, as we're saying, the world will not be a thing in of itself. It's just going to be bishvil haTorah. The whole world is just basically a kli to show you that there ain't od milvado. There's nothing other than Hashem. And that is the very reward of the mitzvah that you did. Is everyone following?
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay. Zion. Now, yesh lahosif. Yeah?
Why does there need to be any reward seen if the mitzvahs aren't things you actually do when Mashiach comes? Like even the Tchias HaMesim time, when we're experiencing mitzvahs as like God's selflessness, and we're not even other entity in the picture. It's just like we're wrapped up in that. Then seemingly seeing that it is that wouldn't make a difference. Like we don't even need to see the schar of the mitzvah. Like we wouldn't even need that as a
There's really, that's what he's trying to say though. It's not like that you're going to sit there and enjoy this reward, like count your money. Your reward is that you're one with God. Right? So in other words, there's no more experience of self. It's just whatever you are is experiencing what God experiences. That's its reward. It's pretty good.
The reward is you don't even need a reward anymore. You just are. You is.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's kafi?
You is, bro.
Kafi as they are.
Okay.
Zion.
So actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good point, because what difference does it make between a guy who did a lot of avodah in the Olam Hazeh and a guy who didn't? If in the end everyone gets to have this level of...
Because the version that we have of Mashiach is that everybody has to do the work. In other words, it's not going to just like pop out of the sky and someone's going to be saved without him actually doing tshuva, right? Tshuva is going to happen for every single Jew. They're going to like earn their reward in this Gilgul or the next. Yesh lahosif. We want to add chapter 7. She'inyin ze mudgash gam b'hadrashas Chazal. This whole thing is also emphasized in what the sages said, that the halachas of Torah einu betelin liolam. And another Chazal, af halachas einu nasin li batel. It says halachas will not be nullified. Halichos olam lo. Right? So where do we learn this? This is basically this idea of this, the whole Shas actually ends with this idea, and we say it every day. Halichos olam lo comes from a pasuk, which means the ways of the world are His. You're familiar with that word? You should, because you say it every day. I hope it's something that you're used to saying. Yeah, halichos olam lo means what? The walking, halichos, the way of the world are His, which means basically the conduct of the world is His. But what do we say right afterwards? Al tikra halichos ella halachos, right? So this we learned that don't read it as the walkings of the ways of the world, but rather you change the word of halichos to halachos, right? And the idea is that from there they learn liyolam yihiyu. From here we learn that the halachos will be forever. In other words, this is one of the drashas from which we learn that the halachos will last forever, because they're basically they're His. The halachas are His, meaning like they're eternal as He is eternal. So we learn this by saying, don't say the ways of the world, or it's really literally the walkings of the world. Let's just translate it as the ways of the world. Don't read it as the ways, but rather read it as the halachas are His. Yes?
But why do we learn out from that the halachas will last forever if we know that the ways of the world will change?
Good, that's the question we're going to ask. Halachot is means the laws. Halichot means walking. What's that? Okay, there's a lot of roots like that come from the same word, right? But I'm saying it can be walking, but obviously when we say the halachos haTorah einu batelos, we're not talking about the walking of the Torah. We're talking, in other words, there's a question that you're asking is why do we call our laws with the word halacha involved, like walking? Yeah. And it's because when the laws make you into a mahalech, there's all kinds of different reasons we can answer. Is that there were the Jews, the souls are called mahalchim ben omdim. We're called walkers amongst the standers. The angels are called standers because they can't really dramatically change their position, right? They're sort of locked into a certain place in the Seder Ishtalshlus. When we have the laws of Hashem, which come from the Ein Sof and are infinite, we tap into, like we're learning in the morning mimer, we tap into something that can fuse opposites, and we basically get touched into the essence of Hashem, which is beyond the Seder Ishtalshlus. So we're sort of like released ourselves from the Mitzrayim, even of Kedusha, that we can be higher than angels. So therefore, we're called walkers amongst the standers, so we call the halachas by the name walking. That's, if you want to, I'm sure there's another 10 drushas as to why, but just to satisfy you, right? Fine. So you do a klal, but Yoshua has actually really the Rebbe's leading question, which is these two statements seem to be opposites from each other, right? Halichos olam lo means the ways of the world are His. And here we're learning that don't read halichos, but halachos, which means halachas are eternal. What do those two things have to do with each other? Seemingly they're opposites, as we'll see. You do a klal. First of all, there's a rule that the Rebbe draws upon often. It's actually one of the principles of his very first mimer, Basi Lagani. He brings this over there, that the Torah mechanism called al tikra, which means don't read this, but rather read that. The Rebbe points out that the way you're supposed to actually use this mechanism is not einu sholel haperush hapashut. It's not supposed to negate the first reading, right? Ela mosif od perush, but it's supposed to add a second perush. So you might read, right? Don't read it the ways of the world, but rather halachas, which means that you shouldn't read the pasuk the ways of the world, right? You should only read it halachas. The Rebbe is pointing out that's not how you use the mechanism called al tikra. The ways of the world are His, and you don't read it only like that, but you can also read it that halachas are His. Shneim emes, that they're both true, right? Both readings. So I don't mean to tear us off the page over here, but the Rebbe uses this in Basi Lagani, al tikra. Does anyone remember where? Where does he say? Al tikra. Al tikra what?
Hashem, but he was still reading like that, read it, he was making others call.
Very good, Yoshua. Al tikra vayikra ele vayakri. Don't read it that he was calling out. Rather, you should read it that he made others call out. So how does the Rebbe learn that this should not just be, don't remove the first reading, but actually add a second reading?
That by making others call out, that's how you call out.
Very good. That you can't call out to Hashem unless you make another Jew call out to Hashem. Wow. In other words, you're calling out. Don't learn it like Avram called out, because you don't read it like that. You read it rather he made others call out, but you don't negate the first one. How did he call out himself? By making another Jew call out. This is like literally the platform of the Rebbe. This was the first mimer, and this is like the thrust of the entire first mimer. If you think you want to connect with God, you can't go to Tzfat, sit on a mountain, and scream Abba Abba all day long. You got to mamash open a Chabad house and make another Jew scream out to Hashem. Otherwise, forget it. You're pretending, right? You're not actually calling out to God unless another Yid calls out to God through you. Put that on in the computer. Now back to our situation. It's the same. Nice work, Yoshua. The same idea. Al tikra halichos olam lo ela halachas. Right? So how are we going to learn this? They're both true. He says the limud of al tikra halichos ela halachas hu bo safa le'inyan de halichos olam lo. We're adding on this concept of the ways of the world are His. Which means we see from here that when it comes to the laws of the Torah, there's actually two concepts or ways of looking at them. One is halichos olam lo. In other words, we're not denying that the ways of the world actually have to do with the halachas, right? But there's also, don't read that Jewish law is only the ways of the world, halichos olam lo. There's also halachas, right? You can read it halachas, which basically means al tikra halichos ela halachas. Don't read it like that, but rather like this. What does it mean? What's the difference between calling the Jewish laws halichos versus halachos? You with me? He says halichos olam lo. What does it mean that the ways of the world are His? Sheyeshna mitzias vanhaga halichos olam. It's assuming, as we said before regarding mitzvahs, that there is something called the ways of the world. There's an existence of man, and there's an existence of the world. Just what? Pulas halacha is the Torah. So the stage one of halacha is that what is the function of the halachas of the Torah? That halichos olam lo. That this world and the ways of it should belong to Hashem. So this is like basically the simple meaning of the word mitzvah. That there's a world, right? But what? Don't just leave the world as it is. You're commanded to take this world and make it His. Which means halichos olam lo. It's still talking about halachas, right? We're not it's just that it's talking about halachas in the sense of taking this world and steering it towards Hashem. Sha'olam yisnag al pi ratzonu shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The world should go according to Hashem's will, and it should be recognized b'poel ubegiloi, and it should be obvious and open. Shekol mahalcho shel ha'olam shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the whole way of the world should be His, right? Convince the world to go in the ways of Hashem. Start with yourself and the world around you.
But Hashem controls everything. So doesn't anything that happens
Akol b'dei shamayim chutz mi yira shamayim.
So then we have advantage.
You have free choice. And what's your free choice? Whether to make this world His or make it yours. Right?
So if we choose to not have fear of heaven, not do a mitzvah, then we have something like above God because He wants us to do something and we're not doing it.
Well, yes, in a certain sense, but God, even that, so to speak, you're getting into a very deep philosophical question over here. I don't mind, but in short, God Himself has two wills. He is the will of the Gila of the Or Ein Sof, and He is the will of the Tzimtzum and no Or Ein Sof, right? Both those things came from Him, and they're totally contrary. So whenever you're going to do something, you're not the one making anything happen, right? He's mechadish b'chol yom maseh b'reishis. You're really doing anything. So what's your free will? You can either decide to draw from the will, which is Gilui Elokus, which is basically you're taking from the pool, which is Hashem's ratzon for revelation, or when your animal soul takes over and you choose poorly, it's still the choice of God. You're not overstepping God. It's just that you're choosing to grab onto His choice of tzimtzum and lack of revelation of God, which is basically the source of klippas and negativity. So in other words, either way, He's controlling the situation. You're just sort of just diverting it, whether it should be a world of gilui, halichos olam lo, or halichos olam, right? Or shelcha. And you're basically just like drawing on an energy which is the concealing nature of Hashem, which is also His will, but it's what we call the chitzonius haratzon. It's His external will. He only wants that because He really wants you to do the right thing with it. But He's willing to create that to give you the option, right? So when you choose poorly, you're grabbing onto the chitzonius haratzon, and you're making Hashem create the will, like against His will, so to speak, which is also His will, but it's His external will.
Does this apply to Banayich and Vonayich also?
To what?
Banayich and Vonayich.
Yeah.
You shouldn't say Banayich, you say
Yeah. Every time you have al tikra, you can apply this. there's a seal of the Shas that the Rebbe made in, I think, 1960, somewhere between 1960 and 1962, where he puts those two things together with Al Tikra, and it's if you want to point it out to you, because they're actually connected, these two things, Al Tikra B'nayich Alabonayich and Al Tikra Halichos Olam Lo. But the scope of this class does not allow for it. Okay. In any case, back to our point, so don't negate either one of these two readings. They're two different ways of looking at halacha. One is like what we said before about this sort of regular notion of mitzvahs, that they're there to connect a world which exists independently to God, halichos olam, but you should make them lo, his. But then, l'mayla mizeh, al tikra halichos. Don't even read this concept of the ways of the world, because they don't even exist at the second level of halacha. Ela halachos. There's a level of Torah which precedes the world. There is no such thing as the ways of the world. Right? Don't read the ways of the world when you're talking about this second category of halacha, because the ways of the world do not exist. Rather, bishvil haTorah. If it exists at all, there's only a world for the Torah in order for God's infinite nature to have an expression. So it says al tikra halichos. Don't read the ways of the world. Because there is no such thing. All there is the existence of Torah. Halachos. Read it as halachos, not halichos, not ways of the world. And therefore, the Briyas HaOlam, he bishvil kiyum ratzonu shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shebehilchos HaTorah. And therefore, if there's a world at all, it's not an independent existence that needs to be connected. Its entire entity is there as a presentation of something beyond nature, beyond creation, and God's himself. And that's called halachos. Al tikra halichos el halachos. Who understands that? You following this? No? Okay, all we're doing is saying the same thing, but in a new, the Rebbe's like showing you what he said before, but in a new chazal, right? Before he tried to show you that one says mitzvahs are batul, where the other one says halachas of Torah are not batul. So we understood there's a difference between mitzvahs and Torah, right? Now he wants to say that there's really in mitzvahs themselves, there's two levels of mitzvahs, right? One will be batul and one will be not. In other words, instead of calling it mitzvahs are batul and Torah is not, really there's an aspect where mitzvahs are also not batul. It's when they're called Torah. So that, right? So he explains to you that there's actually, this is all written in your siddur and you say it every day. There's such a thing as the halachas and the mitzvahs as they are in relationship to the world, and that will be batul. That's called halichos olam lo. Because basically it's saying the ways of the world, which is assuming there's a world, but connected to God, which is like the lower level of mitzvah. But then we're not negating that. That's like for gullus, right? When you feel separate. But al tikra halichos olam lo, ela halachos, which means you can get to a point where there's no world. All there is halachas. The world does not exist. And if you see a world, it's only there because the presence of God's oneness is shining through it. It doesn't have a separate existence. Just like we said before about nullifying the mitzvah, which is commanding you to arrive at the level of like the true ratzon of the mitzvah, which is just God's natural expression of all things going godly without trying. Right? So the same idea is inside of that al tikra zel zeh.
So we're basically just saying that the second idea is that the world exists just for halachas. Like there's no world. It's just halachas, and we have a vehicle using on this world.
Right.
The world's just a way to fulfill halachas.
The world is just not even to fulfill halachas. The world is just a presentation of something beyond creation, which automatically is just a cleave for Gilui Elokus. There's no notion that it needs to be reconnected, right? That's like in Gullus mode. But in Tchias HaMesim mode, right, there isn't a world sitting there that you have to figure out what to do and how to connect it to God. Its very existence is an automatic, natural revelation of God on the highest level, not only God in a level which is beyond creation. So the world of the future will be a world which is everything about it is completely defying all natural law, and it's a presentation of infinity, right? And that's what the higher level of halacha is. Basically, God will show us the part of him which is alone, right? But the fact he's going to show it to us means that there's a world which is showing you this, so that you can experience ana nafshi, I, my soul. And that's called al tikra halichos olam lo ela halachos. Al pizeh. We'll start tomorrow.
Shkoyach, friends.
Shkoyach.
get back to